CISO Choice Awards Vendor Recognition with Richard Stiennon.
Hi, I'm Richard Stiennon, and I'm talking with Chris Cochran, who is the Creative Director and Cybersecurity Advocate at Axonius. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
Chris, before we jump into Axonius and the whole world of asset management, how do you mix being a cybersecurity advocate with being a creative director? Usually I don't hear those two titles together.
You really don't. One thing that I've always been a creative trapped in the body of a technologist. I feel like I really started my career in technology, but I've always had this creative flair to everything I do, even when I was doing threat intelligence, being able to piece together those different points of information and creating a story. And so I felt like eventually I would be able to use that creativity. I started a podcast, Hacker Valley Studio, a few years ago. It grew beyond my wildest imagination. And so I got to feed that creative bug. And slowly but surely, it took over more and more of my life and to be frank, my brain. And so being able to both dip into technology and support and inspire the folks that I've grown to love and support, and then also be able to use that creativeness to do that inspiring stuff. So being able to balance both has really been a dream come true. And that's why it's kind of a dual title.
And Chris, you're probably one of the most experienced threat intelligence professionals I've ever met, right? Over 20 years doing this kind of thing. Or almost that. What appealed to you at Axonius? Because you're looking at threat intelligence, Axonius is looking at pretty much the attack surface. How do you see those two coming together?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I really didn't learn until later in my career is that I spent the majority of my career looking external at the threats, looking at the threat environment. But really what's super important is also taking that same lens and turning it inward and looking at your internals and having a handle just as much on what your security posture looks like, what your tech stack looks like, what your asset management and device management looks like, as just as important as looking external to the corporation. And so I felt like there needed to be this mix and match of that data. And so when I came to Axonius, I thought, like, this is a mission that I can get behind, because I feel like for the majority of cybersecurity initiatives, especially initiatives that are a little bit more advanced and initiatives that are super important to the org, you have to have asset management solved. You have to have that asset intelligence, as we like to call it, which is that additional context for your assets. And so that's what was so appealing to me. And that's why I believe in the mission so wholeheartedly.
When I think about the risk management world, they have always said, step one is identify all your assets. And they've been saying that for decades. So in the back of my mind, because I don't really cover asset management, because to me, that used to be all those labels on the laptops that everybody puts on. I always assumed that people knew how to do that, right? You buy a product, you log it, that you own it, and then you keep track of it through its life cycle. And all of a sudden, there seems to be this massive surge in both investments in and then the growth of companies like Axonius. Mm-hmm. What happened? What changed? Why is asset management taking on a new life all of a sudden?
So it's the thing that we've been talking about for years, like you mentioned, but it's something that we really haven't seen as solvable until now. We had CMDB keeping track of our assets, which was great. We used it. Some people use things like Excel, which is better than nothing, I guess. But what really happened is that we needed a better way to look at our assets. Like, how do we get that holistic picture of what our technical environment looks like without having to do it so manually? And so Dean, our CEO, he had this idea, he had this experience really where he was working with one of his clients, and they had no idea about their asset management. And this is a relatively large company. And he thought that there's no way that this hasn't been solved by another corporation before. And so he found that mission and said that there's got to be a way we can ask these different appliances, different security appliances, different IT appliances, and be able to pull that data back, aggregate it, and then be able to analyze it in a way that gives you that holistic picture of what it looks like in your environment. And so that's why it's just now, like coming back into the conversation, because up until now, it was an unsolved issue. People were okay with giving a range of, oh, how many Windows devices do I have? How many iOS devices? How many of my workstations have this particular application on it? But now we can give an answer, which is reinvigorating that conversation and making people excited again about asset management.
Okay, and how does it fit into the world of security that we've been talking about, the threat intelligence and the rest? I mean, it's okay, now I know what I've got. How does that make me more secure, better able to stop the latest attack?
I feel like asset management or asset intelligence is just as important for IT as it is for security. You can't fight what you can't see. If you have unmanaged devices, if you have entire subnets that don't have your EDR or XDR agents on them, you might want to know that, because let's say it's the end of the week, it's a Friday, because incidents always happen on a Friday, and everyone goes home and you get that critical alert. You get that critical alert that everyone has to come back in because you have to solve this incident. You have to look for the ground truth of what happened. What is that patient zero? You're figuring out, all right, what else is infected? We have to contain it. And then once you contain it, then you eradicate it. And then you go through a remediation and recovery. Everyone slaps high fives and then they go home. But what if you didn't have a good handle of what your assets are in your environment? There could be an entire section of your organization that's still infected with whatever it is. And so all of that effort, bringing people in on their off time, going through that mental exercise and going through the stress was almost for nothing, because now you have to bring people back in to complete the incident. But once you have that handle on what assets you have and you can step into that incident with confidence that you know the entire picture, it makes things a lot easier. And this goes for incident management, this goes for vulnerability management, this goes for threat hunting, threat intelligence, really, you name it in cybersecurity, asset management's important.
So I haven't seen the interface, but I assume you can go, hey, show me every Windows machine with this level of software on it, and because I need to do something special with them, and then you can just tell me where they are and what they do.
100%. And not only that, you could see where the deltas are. Like we were talking about EDR, XDR agents before, because if you spend a lot of money having these protections for your environment, wouldn't you love to be able to see where the delta is? Where did I not deploy my agents? Because if you don't have that protection, they might be just sitting there and do things that you don't really want them to do. You could do that. You also can have reports that are delivered to you based on the logic that you create. So what are the questions that you want to ask of that data? One of the most important things that a CISO does is they have to have the ability to ask the right questions and then take those answers and make decisions or take action on their security posture. So having something that has all of that data in one place is unbelievably important to be able to ask those questions. Where are my agents? Am I scanning my cloud infrastructure as regularly as I'm scanning my on-prem devices? There's a lot of questions that you can ask when you have all that data in one place.
I wonder if there's a extra burden to somebody doing a good job of asset management, because they go, hey, we're working in the dark, we got to discover what we have before we can protect it, so let's invest in Axonius. And all of a sudden you go, oh my god, we've got 10,000 whatever, so we didn't know we had, and we have to deploy agents that cost us a lot of money to each one of those. It's like all of a sudden the new costs may outweigh the original perceived benefits. Do you run into that as an objection ever? I mean, probably not, because they don't know what they have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't see why that would ever be an objection, because they would have to basically say, like, how dare you show me something that wasn't protected?
Right.
We haven't run into that one. In fact, I mean, a lot of clients are relieved when we can give them that holistic picture. In fact, there is a story of somebody that utilized our free trial that we give, and once they used it, they were so excited because they could see that visibility. It's almost like putting in those night vision goggles in the night. But then when the trial was over, they weren't able to purchase it right away, so they had to take those night vision goggles off, and then they were back in the dark. And it's almost like you want to have that visibility back. You want to put those goggles back in because you want to see what you have in your environment at all times. Because with all this digital transformation, there's a lot of companies that are going from on-prem to cloud native infrastructure. Things are changing quite rapidly. You have folks that are being onboarded because they're remote employees, because no one's going into the office. So things come in and out of your environment very rapidly. And anybody that's in IT, they know this. And people in security, they need to understand when things change, because it's quite often the anomalous thing. The thing that changes is the thing that you have to investigate. And sometimes it's suspicious, sometimes it's just weird, and sometimes it's malicious. So being able to pinpoint when things change is super important.
And I can see some opportunities for cost savings too, because once you know what all your assets are and what's on them and what they're doing, you can figure out, hey, we don't actually use that thing over there that we still pay support for instance, and we can get rid of it. Yeah.
100%.
And does all this carry over into the cloud? Because there's a lot of assets there.
It has to. If we were only on-prem physical devices, we'd be out of a job, because everyone is moving. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people are moving to the cloud, because there's definitely a lot of efficiencies. There's integrations that happen in the cloud that help support those business operations. There's a lot of benefit to it, but there's also a lot that you have to keep track of when you move to the cloud. So one of the things that's important that we saw a lot around 2017, 2018 was the issues with people that were putting like S3 buckets that were exposed to the internet, just so anybody could happen upon them. And then you have a breach unintentionally. It doesn't even have to necessarily be an attacker that physically and looks for your information. You could accidentally deploy your stuff incorrectly. So being able to have that view of like, okay, which of these E2 instances or S3 buckets do I have that might be publicly exposed? Because there's some that you might want to have exposed for some odd reason or another. Maybe you're working with other folks, but there's also an issue with folks doing it unintentionally. So if you can have that snapshot of like, okay, where is all my cloud infrastructure? How is it architected? What are the configs that we have on it? Being able to keep track of all that stuff is important as well.
Got it. Chris, I want to thank you so much for helping me understand the whole world of asset management.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Stay tuned for more from CISOs Connect.